Welcome to the Breakthrough to Brilliance podcast, where we have inspiring and insightful conversations about breaking free from life's biggest challenges to find fulfillment and purpose. I am your host, Seema Giri, an international speaker, best-selling and award-winning author, book writing mentor, and publisher. I bring you real-life stories of healing and transformational journeys so that you know that you can create life on your own terms. Our heart-centered guests are the everyday heroes that you find in your backyard, from mothers to sisters to friends to entrepreneurs and authors. Join us to hear their positive and powerful stories so you too can learn to live with purpose and joy. Welcome to Breakthrough to Brilliance podcast. I'm so happy to be here with you with another exciting episode. And our guest today is Dr. Alan Lycka. Dr. Alan Lycka, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me. It is truly a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So before we get started, we're going to do a quick grounding meditation and then get on with the interview. So if you could close your eyes, be comfortable in your seat, and take a deep inhale and exhale. And with every exhale, I want you to let go of any stress, anxiety, worry that you have. You have appointments after this, I know, and I promise you they'll be waiting for you when we're done here. Take in another inhale and exhale. And with the next inhale, I would like you to bring your awareness to your heart. You might even want to put your hand there to have that awareness. And I want you to think of a happy moment. It can be from any time period in your life, including today. So just breathe that in. And when you have that moment, relive it as if you're living it for the very first time. Experience the joy, the peace that you had at that time, the bliss. Think of the people you were with, or maybe it was a time just for you. And just embody that, breathe that in, exhale. Now I would like you to bring your awareness to the top of your head, which is the crown chakra, and think of a second happy moment. Again, it can be from any time period of your life, including today. Okay, now take that in. When you have that moment, I want you to relive that moment as if you're living it for the very first time. Exhale. Feel the joy and the peace and the bliss. Think of the people that you were with and how that felt. Taking a deep inhale and exhale. Embody that. Now I would like you to open your heart and mind, now that they're connected, to what the possibilities are of what you will hear today. Perhaps it's for you, or perhaps it's for someone that needs to hear a message that you hear today from you. You're the messenger. And I'd like to invite Dr. Lycka and myself to become totally present in the moment and tune into the energy of what our listeners, our audience needs to hear from us today. And with the next inhale in and exhale, you open your eyes with a great big smile. Dr. Lycka, how was that little grounding meditation for you?
I love meditation and I love to be grounded in the things. I think it is an important part of people's lives. I think people should spend some time in quietness in times to do that. It doesn't take long for people. I think people have a misconception that you have to say for a half an hour and concentrate on things for a long period of time. You can reset things quite readily by doing things in a very fundamental way.
Exactly. Even just, focusing on your breath and feeling your chest go in and up and down. for a minute or two can be tremendous, can have a tremendous effect.
Yes, for sure. And, I think this is a great stress reliever. I think people would be able to get rid of a lot of their anxiety if they just spend that time to do that and
Mhm.
let that stress go.
Exactly. Well, Dr. Lycka, I want to formally introduce you to our audience. So, Dr. Alan Lycka suffered a near death experience and sought renewal through the wisdom of human virtues that refocused him on a life of richness, appreciation, joy, and service. He is now a full time, life changing speaker, acclaimed author, and transformational leader. That is an amazing background, Dr. Alan Lycka. Um, so, what made you decide to go into medicine? I always wonder when people go into a certain profession, what was that defining moment that made you decide that?
I don't know if there was any single defining moment, but I was I was fascinated by helping people and helping to cure people. I never had any members in my family that were medical doctors or things like that. I actually grew up in a middle class, lower income family. I was the firstborn son, so my parents told me, "You're going to go to university because we don't want you to work like I did." So I decided to go to university and I started to look at things I liked. My first degree was in psychology, and I liked that. But, there was something about medicine that I thought this would be good. Now, medicine was extremely competitive. It was an extremely hard field to get into. But I worked hard. Instead of partying on Friday nights, I'd go and crack the books. I'd go and work hard at things. And I was able to get my marks up to a point that I was accepted. And I was accepted first at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Alberta. And soon after, I was accepted at the University of Calgary in the Calgary, Alberta. And I decided to go to the University of Edmonton. So it was a great experience. I mean, um, medicine is a very tough field, even still, to get through. I mean, to go through medical school, you work day and night for many, many years to become a qualified doctor. And once you get through, then there's a lot of training afterwards. And the training afterwards is also very difficult. And then when I went through that training, the thing I found that I liked the most was dermatology or skin disease. So that's where I went into that. And so again, it was very competitive and very hard to get into. So I had to apply to a number of schools, and I ended up going to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to take my degree there.
Amazing. So we have that in common as well. And I think that was my parents' trick to make sure I did well in school because they said, you need to go into medicine. I didn't have any other choice until I got into pre-med. And then they said, you know what? It's going to take you a really long time. Go into business. And I had to switch at the last minute. But I can understand, the pressures of studying. So, with all that pressure and hard work, Dr. Lycka, you decided to leave your career in medicine to write your book, How to Live a Fantastic Life. Why could you not have written while you had your career still?
Well, I was diagnosed with a terminal illness in 2003. I was told that I had a disease called ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And, that was a crippling thing. I was told I had 6 months to live. When you go through something like that, you start to wonder and you start to look for things. And fortunately, I was able to find the proper diagnosis, but it took a lot of work and a lot of things. When you're told by the world leading neurologist that you're going to die in 6 months, most people would just buckle in and listen to them. For
Yes.
me, I said, no, there must be something else. And I went to my wife and she said, I don't think you have ALS. I don't think you have Lou Gehrig's disease. I said, what do I have? She said, I haven't got the faintest idea. I said, what do I do? I've seen every doctor imaginable. She said, you probably haven't found the right doctor yet. So in 2003, something brand new was invented. It was called the internet. you know, Back then it was primitive. You had to use dial-on connections to get onto it. We
Yes.
didn't have Dr. Google then. We didn't have Dr. Yahoo then. But the thing is, we had other things that got us on. And I had friends that were nerds, and they told me, we'll help you. And I found a doctor in Colorado Springs, Colorado, that had a disease very similar to mine, except he got worse much more rapidly. That doctor's name was David Martz. And because of him, I'm here today. David was able to, David was so sick. He got so sick so quickly that people from around the world were saying goodbye to David. And the doctor came up from Texas and looked at David and said, David, I don't think you have ALS. I think you have something called chronic Lyme's disease. I think you've been bitten by a tick, and I think it's mimicking ALS. So David said, well, what do I do? The doctor from Texas said, you need to do nothing. I'll start you on treatment, and if I'm right, you'll get better. And a miracle happened. Like Lazarus, he arose from the dead. Within 2 weeks, he was back to normal.
Oh my goodness.
So I went to see David in Colorado Springs, and he told me some miracle words. He said, I think history is repeating itself. I think I can make you better as well. So he started me on treatment, and that's how I was able to maintain being a doctor at the top of my field. But I was a dermatologist for 30 years, and it was time to go into something else. And I knew it was time to help people in more ways than just I was doing. So that's where I decided to step away. And my book came out in 2020, just at the start of the pandemic. I was planning on speaking around the world, things like that. But at that time, there was no speaking around the world. The world went into hibernation for 2 years.
Yes.
And so I started a podcast, and my podcast became so popular, it turned into a syndicated radio show, which is now enjoyed by 3 million people a month.
It sounds like it was like the perfect timing. Like for my books, it was perfect timing for you too, to be able to reach people in different ways where people really needed the hope and inspiration.
Well, and I think that was the thing that was going on there. And I still think people even need more hope and inspiration right now. The world is in a funk. The world is going through a mass grief reaction right now. I mean, every day there's negative news. We have high inflation. We have high gas prices. We have a war in the Ukraine that's hurting so many people. There's awful images coming up all the time, and it is not a pleasant time in the world. And then we have all this racial violence that's going on. We have all this hate that's going on between hate groups that's going on out there. So the world needs help. They need a positive message. They need a message where people can get to another level.
It is so critical. It's amazing how I've had a misdiagnosis as well, as we shared that before. And I'm just like an ordinary person, right? I don't have the expertise in medicine. I was really surprised to hear that even though your whole background is in medicine and you have, good relations with other doctors, that you still got a wrong diagnosis. It just blows my mind.
Well, I don't blame the doctor for what he did giving me that diagnosis. A doctor can only know what he knows. He cannot know what he does not know.
Exactly.
And often things are not black and white. They're often gray. And as a dermatologist, I realized that when I looked at disease, I looked at it differently than other people. I usually would look at a skin rash and say, well, this may be this, or it may be this, or it may be this, or it may be this. And so that's what we call differential diagnosis. And I think the biggest problem people have is they don't realize that when things are gray, there's many things can be. And, the diagnosis of ALS is one where everything else is excluded. Well, back in 2003, people had not heard of chronic Lyme's disease. And even now in 2022, there's doctors that argue that chronic Lyme's disease does not exist.
Yes, yes, I've heard about that. Um, there's in some areas there has not been much advancement, but I believe everything happens for a reason and a lesson that we need to learn. What was your biggest lesson from this incorrect diagnosis of ALS?
The thing I learned is the number one principle that's in my book, and that is it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. That you have to be 100% responsible for everything that goes on in your life. You have to take the responsibility for that. And that's what I teach my students. That's what I teach people in my classes. That's what I teach people in my lectures. That's what people have to know, that you can't be a victim. You have to be the victor. And you have to put yourself along that path. And you have to make yourself do that. Now, how do you do that? Quite often with baby steps. You can't do it by giant steps. It's got to be done a little bit along the way. But let's suppose you want to change in your life. Well, all you have to do is do a couple of things. First, choose a good book to read. Eat better foods in your life. Don't eat the crap that people eat out there. Be happy. Choose to be happy, not sad. Look for happy messages, not for sad messages all the time. And your life will start changing. And then you should start giving back. You should do something for somebody today that you wouldn't normally do. And if you did that each and every day, the world would be a better place. And I'm going to challenge your listeners out there to do something for somebody else today that they wouldn't normally do. I'm going to challenge them to actually do something, not just listen to the message, but take it to heart.
Take it to heart and take it to action. No, I'm glad you're challenging my audience for that, because that's what we need to do. We were talking earlier about it, and it's the kindness. If we can just extend one kindness, a small gesture, even a smile, can make such a huge difference in someone else's life. We have no idea what the other person is going through, and that smile, I've heard, Dr. Lycka, it has saved people from committing suicide. Just a smile, or just a hello, or just a how are you? It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, exactly. Like suppose you're in the grocery store line, and there's somebody behind you. Well, say hi to them. Say, I'm hoping you're having a fantastic day. I am. It's surprising how many people will respond to that.
Yeah. Since there's been such a shortage in workers at the grocery store, at restaurants, and many different places due to the pandemic, I've started thanking every person at every place that I go. Thank you for showing up today, because if they didn't show up that day, I wouldn't be able to do what I needed to
And
do.
you should at a restaurant, you should always talk to your server, and you should always find out a little bit about them. Get their name, find out what they do in addition to being a restaurant worker. Find out little things about them. It's an amazing thing how the world is when you start paying attention to them.
And the secret is, Dr. Lycka, it not only makes them feel good, but it makes you feel so good. So if you're looking for short shots of happiness every day, this is it.
Absolutely. It's that little giving is what matters, and that's what makes us human beings. That makes a little bit of difference. So again, I challenge people to do these little things on a daily basis, and then to increase them a little bit on a daily basis.
Great challenge. So you talk a lot about enthusiasm. Why is that so important to living a fantastic
Well,
life?
let me tell you a story because in my book, there's a wonderful little story that there was a carpenter and his name was Fred. He had worked in the same job for every day of his life. So after 45 years, he was tired. Didn't have the enthusiasm anymore. And so he went to his boss and said, Boss, I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. The boss was taken aback. He said, Fred, you're my master carpenter. You have helped me build every house that we've built together in the entire years that you've been with me. He said, Fred, can you do one more thing for me before you go? And Fred said, Well, of course, boss. I've loved it here. I'll do anything. He said, Just build me one more house. You're the master carpenter. I will I will do anything if you build me that last house. Fred said, Oh, okay. But he did it begrudgingly. And he could hardly get the job done.
Mm.
He dragged his ass to work every day, and he didn't have the enthusiasm there. For the first time in his life, he produced shoddy workmanship. No, at the end, a miracle happened. The house still passed inspection. So he went to the boss and said, Okay, here's the keys to this last house. I hope you enjoy it. The boss said, Hold it, Fred. We're going to have a party. So he called everybody into the office, and everybody had champagne. They had caviar. They all wished Fred his their best. And the boss said, Okay, everybody, gather around. Everybody, this is Fred's last day. I'm going to be very sad because he's been my best worker. And he said, Fred, I've got a gift for you on your last day. Here's the keys to the last house you ever built. May you live in it in all the enthusiasm you've given me all the years of your life. Now, the reason I tell you that story, Seema, is enthusiasm's not a Monday thing. It's not a Tuesday thing. It's not a Wednesday thing. It's something you bring to the game every day of your life. It's the game changer. It's the thing that makes everything happen. Just like for Fred, can you picture the magnificent palace he would have built if he had the enthusiasm to do so?
Yes.
Well, he cheated himself by not doing the enthusiasm that he had there. And enthusiasm is a choice, just like many things in life is a choice. You can choose to be miserable or you can choose to be enthusiastic. Which should you choose to do?
It's very well said, Dr. Lycka, and the story really brings it into perspective that how choosing enthusiasm is so important every day. And I never thought of it from that perspective before, that you can choose enthusiasm, but it really makes sense that you can do that. Um, so while you were going through this difficult time, like you said, it was when you were going through the ALS or the chronic Lyme, was it um, defined as chronic Lyme disease?
That's what we think it is. But the answer is with all these things, you never really know. But the thing is, I didn't die 20 years ago.
Thank
The
goodness.
important thing is I'm alive. And now is the time to really make a difference in people's lives as a result of that. People should ask themselves, do you live? Do you love? Do you really matter? And if you ask yourself those simple questions, you will decide what's important for you in your life.
Exactly. But what I would like to ask you, Dr. Lycka, is when you're in that extreme pain, in that dire situation where you see there's no hope, how do you get out of that? And is that the time also to find enthusiasm?
You know, Sometimes pain is a good thing, believe it or not. Pain means we're still alive. And, you know, a month or two ago, I had developed a sore on my toe. And it was a painful sore that every step that I was taking, it was hurting. Now, it came about because we were in Las Vegas and we were doing a lot of walking there, and it came about as a result of that. So I went to see a foot doctor, a podiatrist, and that podiatrist said to me, I am so glad you have a sore toe. And I said, why? It's hurting like heck. She said, because I treat diabetics that can't feel their toe and they have the world's worst ulcers on there. And she said, that is a terrible situation because many of them are going to lose their toe as a result of that. So, we should be grateful also for the pain we have. We should also be grateful that we have the breath in our bodies every day. We should be grateful that the sunshine comes up every day. We should be grateful that we can go out and smell the roses and the daisies. We should be grateful for those little moments. It is hard sometimes to see those things. But in our greatest despair comes our greatest hope. And I think you found that yourselves, that when you were going through that terrible chronic neurological illness, that autoimmune disease, but guess what? That gave birth to the way you are now. That gave you the other, we can't see the mountains of exaltation unless we have the depths of despair. And those depths of despair are something that's awful for all of us, but they often lead to bigger and better things in our lives.
I totally agree with you there, Dr. Lycka. So, to our listeners, I would like to say that if you're in a situation where you feel like, you're in a depression or you're feeling despair or just with how things are today in our world, like Dr. Lycka said, there's always something to be grateful for and some, ray of sunshine around us. You just need to look a little bit. I know at this time it's hard to see, but know that you're not alone and know that, like myself and Dr. Lycka, we've come out of it. So we know how it is, and it's possible to come out of it. And through our books that you can read, you can certainly get some level of inspiration. Just take baby
and,
steps.
and for goodness sakes, if you're having a time that's so desperate you're thinking of committing suicide, there are people that can help you. Get in touch with those people. There's some in your state, there's some in your city. Get in touch with them. They will be able to help you through this desperate time.
And it's okay to ask for help. I know many people feel that it's not okay to ask for help. You're not small, and you're not, bad for asking that. You need that help, and tomorrow you'll extend your help to someone else. Well, we're almost coming to the end of our program, Dr. Lycka. How can people get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is at my website. It's www.drallen, Lycka, Lycka.com. And if anybody would like a free 15-minute session with me where we can go through some discovery of your problems, I offer that as well. My girl Tammy will arrange for that 15-minute session. And really, I'd love to talk to you if you have something to talk about. Please, I'm here to serve you and help you. And that's what I'd love to offer for you.
That is a wonderful offer, a very generous offer, Dr. Lycka. Thank you so much. So, listeners, please do take him up on that. That is an amazing offer, and it's okay to reach out for help. That's what we're both here for. And, we all have to take that first step, and small actions every day lead to bigger results. Dr. Lycka, thank you so much for being on our show today. In honor of our upcoming book, Brighter Side of the Pandemic, I'd like to ask you, and I think you've told us, but I'm going to ask you anyway, what was your brighter side of the pandemic?
I look at these things and I say, geez, it was terrible that we had to spend time in our homes with our families for the first time that we were able to slow things down in our lives. We've got this wonderful thing called the internet where we can communicate around the world now. And every day I'm talking to people on Zoom around the world, and it shrunk the world as a result of this. And I think the pandemic has made us realize that we can do things now that we could have never thought possible in years gone by. We have this ability now as a result of that. Now, that ability we can use for good or we can use it for bad. It's our choice. I choose to look at it for good, that people should always look at it for good.
Amazing. No, I totally agree. Thank goodness I'm always grateful and being thankful to God for being born at a time like today, where with technology advances, we're able to do so much more and not feel 100% abandoned.
Well, look at what we were able to do in this pandemic. We were able to invent vaccines that came out rapidly, that were able to stop this pandemic without it endangering so much of the world. Within 2 years, we have gotten this reasonably under control.
Yes, and I think it's the fastest probably in history.
Absolutely. So, that is an amazing. And many of these vaccines that have come out now are going to be used for other things because we now have the technology that can help us with other diseases that we didn't even know that we could use now.
Yes, and that's the best news, that now the future diseases that are discovered that come have that has the shortened life cycle of discovering and coming up with different solutions for it compared to 10-20 years we've had to deal with before.
Absolutely.
That's amazing advances. Dr. Lycka, thank you so much for being here. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has as well. And our audience, please, look up at our other podcasts and future podcasts. We'll have amazing guests on there too, like Dr. Lycka, and you can listen to the past ones on your favorite channels. So until next time, next episode, this is Seema.
I hope you enjoyed our time together. I know I did. Through this transformational journey, I hope you could see yourself taking similar steps, breaking free to your brilliance, and creating the life that you desire. Please subscribe to our Break Free to Brilliance podcast at your favorite listening place. Tune in to next time for another amazing episode.